the word POTOMITAN is not it's not a word to be taken lightly. It is a significant title of what that means, and I'm just incredibly honored, truly honored to have been a part of this movement that you all are starting, to really honor women in our community who are doing this work. I sincerely hope that the next generation who's watching, reading, and so forth said, how do I continue this? Because the POTOMITAN work that you're doing is a legacy building. That's an endowment part of well, right? And we need to make sure that it's continuing for generations and generations to come. So congratulations to all of you for the amazing work. Truly, truly is a blessing. Well, I have to tell you a funny story that I had a conversation with my mother a couple months ago, and she was in a space where somebody said Dr. G, and she's like, "How did you lose your name? Like, what happened to your name?" And I said, "Oh, let me tell you this funny story, because a number of my really sort of young hip students, said, like, you are like our Dr. G, like they meant like she's GOAT, like kind of Dr. G." And then it stuck. Everybody like really now it really is like a big thing. But my full name, as you know, is Marie Gerda Nicolas. I was born and raised in Grand Goave. I was born in Grand Goave, but raised in Tigouave, where I went to most of my schooling. And where I grew up. I am the oldest of 3 kids. I have a sister, Evelyn Alexis, who's a professor at Oberlin and a historian. She has a new book coming out called, Haiti Fights Back. That's coming out actually this month. And then I have a younger brother who's an accountant, Kevin Jean, who's in Brooklyn, New York, which is where we were raised in the States. So I call Brooklyn home in terms of my identity here in the state, but I've lived in many other places in the United States, just like I live right now in Miami. I claim Miami as my residence, but I remind people that I'm from Brooklyn in the United States, and I am from Haiti as always. So I am a psychologist by profession, right? So I'm trained as a psychologist. I think this year will make me my 30th year that I've been a psychologist. When I first started out in the field, I knew one other psychologist that was of Haitian descent out of Boston. I didn't know another one, but I understood the importance of the mind, and I understood the importance of behavior, and that is really one of the reasons why I went into the field. And so as a psychologist, I sought out to really work with the Haitian community and to really work as a clinician. And it was on in my second year of my doctoral training at Boston University that my mentor at that time got sick, and he couldn't teach his undergraduate class. And so he said, "Well, you're my doctoral advisee. You have to teach the undergraduate class." And I had never taught a class before. And I said, "But I'm Haitian." So we like, "Look at it, bagay." I said, "I'm ready, to go." And I said, "Yes, of course, I'll go teach that class." And it was at that moment that I found that I absolutely love teaching. I love imparting knowledge and really, doing that kind of work. And then I started asking myself, like, why did I never thought about this before? Why did I never thought about the idea of being a professor? I just assumed that psychologists saw people for therapy, and that's what I was going to go do as a part of the community. And it occurred to me that upon coming to the US at the age of 16, when I came to the United States, that I had never had a Black professor ever in my training not at the undergraduate level, not at my master's level, and at my doctoral. So it never occurred to me that Black people were professors at a university, because I didn't see many of them. And it was at that moment I realized I wanted to also be a professor. So I can say I'm a clinical psychologist, but I've been a professor for the last 28 years as well. So I really wanted to make sure that not only was I going to provide clinical work to our people, and I was going to focus on mental well-being of our people, but I was going to train more of our people. I didn't want another Black student to go to a university and not see another Black professor. And because we know representation matters, and we know the fact that if I'm there, then somebody else is more likely to come, right, as well. And so that really changed for me. It changed my trajectory in terms of what is it that I thought I was going to do, and really, fast forward my career to now become a professor in the academy. But I didn't realize that the percentage of Black professors in the United States was so dismal. I didn't realize that the percentage of those, what the process is to get tenure. I didn't understand that there were these different ladders that you had to climb, and that each one of those ladders that you get a chance to climb, it's sort of like, it's like painstakingly, as a professor. But one of the things that has allowed for me to do is it allows me to be an advocate as well. So when you say what you do, it allows me to be a community engaged person. It allows me to ensure that the work that I'm doing is grounded in the community, that I open up the community, no matter what community I am, whether or not I was at Boston College, where I was for many years, I was at Columbia for many years when I started my career. Now that I'm at the University of Miami, it's like, how do I open these spaces for more people like me, for more immigrant folks, for more women of color to see that this too is a space that they belong in as well. Yeah. So Haiti Community Trust is the country's very first community foundation that is using an endowment model. So here's how it works. You give me $100, right? I take $100. So if you give me $100, instead of me going to spend my $100, I can say out of the $100, I need $20 to actually live. So I'm going to take $20 out of it. I'm going to take $80 of my 100 and I'm going to invest it in the market. And so you invest it as a part of a larger investment portfolio. That $80 is going to yield you 5%. So every time you add to that, so if you get another $80, you add to the 80, now you have 160. Now you're going to invest 160 and then you're going to yield 5% of it. So you see, your $80 never gets touched. The more you put in it, the more it's going to give you back. So that's one of the reasons why our goal is $20 million. Because if we do $20 million, we know we're going to yield about $1 million a year to support grassroots organizations in the country. Can you imagine? Well, Haiti didn't have its own community foundation in the same way that is there to support, and certainly not one that's using this endowment model. Every month I'm in the country and we are focusing on mental health, mental wellness, mental well-being overall. I am in Port-au-Prince, I'm in Cité Soleil, I'm in Tigouave, Grand Guave, I'm in Okap, working with physicians and nurses because I want the physicians and nurses to understand psychological issues of the mind, because oftentimes I know my sister friends who are watching this and all of you will understand this, that you don't feel well and you go to the doctor and they can't find anything wrong with you and they assume that there's nothing there. Well, anxiety and depression affects the body in the same way as all other diseases. So we wanted to make sure that we are also training physicians and nurses on how to recognize mental health symptoms. I'm like throughout the country doing all of this work. And in the midst of that, the earthquake hit. And I'm in Okap at that time. And after that earthquake, I begin to ask myself the question, and what are we really doing that's really is going to be sustainable in this country? What are we doing that's going to be there from not just in my generation, but for the generations to come? I reconnected with a good friend of mine, Pierre Imbert, who was just coming back home to Haiti to do some grant work for a foundation called the Bar Foundation out of Boston. And it is in that connection that we begin to talk about what are the gaps, what's missing, for us. And the concept of Haiti Community Trust was born. And so we spent some time, really meeting with other foundations throughout the world. I went to Puerto Rico, I went to St. Croix, I went to Brazil, I went to South Africa, really meeting with other folks like who has similar terrain like us to get a sense of this creation of this foundation, right? So what are the gaps? And one of the things I notice is that we have a huge international aid dependence. So we are dependent on international aid, but when it comes into the country, it does not make itself into the rural communities. It does not make itself to the grassroots organizations in the country. So one of the things we wanted to do was to create a foundation that was going to be based in Haiti, that had an investment component to it. That's really huge, because that's what makes it so innovative, is that we are raising $20 million in an endowment fund, and that endowment fund is gonna keep grandi. Cap fait petit, cap fait petit, cap fait petit, cap fait petit. So that means that we are only taking the yield of that $20 million to do the grassroots grant making in the country, which means that the fund that we are raising still is invested, and whether or not I'm here or my grandkids are here, it's still going to be there for the very long term, right? So if you look at most of the foundations, they are using this model, this endowment model, so that if in fact, right, Kat decided today she's going to give me $1 million, right, as a part of this foundation, I can take $1 million and go to Haiti and spend it in less than a week. And the Kat may not necessarily even see 6 months later where I spend that money. But if we invest that money, if I take $1 million and I invest it, and I'm using the yield of that money, and I'm supporting grassroots organizations that are already in the country doing work in the area of civic education, entrepreneurship, and the environment, then you have the opportunity to build thriving communities, to really create change at the community level. And so that's what the foundation is about. It is a foundation that, that it's no longer a gather created or peer created foundation. It is a foundation for the country, and it's being governed by a board to really to support grassroots organizations. No, it's because as you guys know, anytime you're trying to do something, and particularly if you're trying to do something where I believe, Kat, I believe very strongly that Haitians can come together and we can build a fund that we will say that was built by Haitians for Haitians. And so I was determined to really ensure that this fund was going to be built by us. So I wasn't going to a whole lot of other people that typically are extending a hand to Haiti, right, and so forth. And when you do that, you tell people what you're doing, particularly when Haiti is in the news all the time. There's always some issues going on. They're like, get that, oh Lord, that is that, that, so you hear a lot of the naysayers, you hear a lot of the, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think this is possible. I don't think, Haitians don't trust themselves, right? And so forth and so on. So we definitely had to face some of that. We also had to face, part of the reason why we call it Haiti Community Trust is because we recognize that there's a trust issue, in the country in a meaningful way. I get it. As a psychologist, I understand where our erosion of trust comes from, right? So, historically, in the historical trauma in ways that we've been wrong. So it makes sense that people would want to ask you the questions all the time. But we wanted to be able to create it, to put the trust in the name of the foundation, to say, this one is going to be different. There's going to be a level of transparency. You should be able to see where your fund is going. So one of the reasons why we partnered with the Miami Foundation, which is one of the oldest community foundation, is that the money, when Kat makes a donation, it doesn't come together. It goes directly to the Miami Foundation, who then invest it as a part of their portfolio, right? And then we use the yield of that for the purpose of the grant making. And so that's also an issue in terms of the challenge. It's really making sure that people understand that this one is different, right? Given the fact that we tried so many things, we're trying so many different things for the country. It's like, what will make this different, as well? So that's been really some challenges, and it's not easy raising $20 million. I keep saying I am determined, I am committed, and every time I meet a young person and I tell them that we're raising $20 million, you know what they said to me? They said, that is nothing. That's what they said. They said, that is nothing. Raising $20 million is nothing. That is a Starbucks. You just get that. I pay more money. I pay $6 on a Starbucks coffee. If I save my Starbucks fund every single week and I put it towards this fund, we can raise $20 million in a heartbeat, right? So we know that it's not hard for us to be able to do, but it's about bringing the collective and to believe in something that they can see, that's not something that they're doing for me, but they're creating something for the generation to come. And it's hard for you to not want to see. We're so big on, if I give it to you, can I get some pictures? Can you show me what we're doing? And what we're saying is we have got to develop a mentality of investing. We have to invest for the future, and you have to be okay. I have to be okay with the idea that I am not going to be around for 50 years to see the work of this foundation, but I have to build it anyway. And so those are some of the challenges, but let me tell you, man, the rewards, the rewards of really just, just seeing the when somebody says we don't have enough not-for-profit organizations that are in the country, that are credible, that you could support in the areas of civic education, entrepreneurship, and environment. And we put out a call for proposal, and we see 200. So now we can tell you we have a database of grassroots organizations that are throughout the country doing amazing work that have been around for a very long time, but they don't get access to the funds that oftentimes comes into the country because there's oftentimes some red tapes that they have to jump. Most people don't even know who they are and what they're doing. And so we get a chance to say, man, we get to shine a light on these organizations, these rural grassroots organizations that are doing the work. And if we could just continue to support them and elevate them, then you can just imagine what that would mean for community development, for community thriving. And so that's exciting. And the young people, they fuel me. We have a group within our foundation called the Vent team. I didn't create it. I wish I was that genius to create that concept. When we met with them, they said, listen, we want to be a part of Haiti Community Trust. How can we be involved? What is it that you need us to do in order for us to be able to get to do the work we want to do? I said, well, what is it that you want to do? They said, we want to have fellowship as part of Haiti Community Trust. We want to have the Haiti Community Trust fellows, right? And I said, you want to be fellows? They're like, yes, we want to be Haiti Community Trust fellows. And I said, but in order for us to be fellows, for us to have a full foundation, we need to raise the fund. They're like, okay, so how much money do we need to raise? $20. They're like, okay, so we're going to ask everybody to contribute $20. That's the Vent pour Vent, towards $20 million. And then as soon as we raise our $20 million, we can start having fellowships, programs, and so forth. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly it. So they are super excited and charged. And all they're doing is asking their friends to donate $20 towards $20 million. And they believe in what this can do in the future of all of the things that we're doing right now as a part of the foundation. One of them is, I know many of your readers here and the viewers might really be familiar with Ilavash, and we really wanted to. One of the things that we saw in Ilavash was the issue of water. Access to water was a major issue, as it is in many parts of the country. But because it's a smaller place, and we wanted to be able to show people what could happen when communities come together to actually address an issue. And so one of the things that we did was to partner with, and this is where a foundation comes in, right? So that we can call another partner and said, listen, we have an excellent project that we think you should join on. Would you join us? And PADF, the Pan American Development Foundation, was one of them who joined us and allow us to create a project that built piping on the ground that allowed people to have access of water throughout the town. So it's like, we don't have to bring water. to the communities anymore. We can, by building the piping that allows people to have access to water, it meant that the young girl didn't have to travel very far in the morning to go get water on top of her head anymore. It meant she didn't have to do it after school to go get water, to fetch water for her people. And we have that throughout the country right now. And the solution to the problem is not to bring bottled water to communities, because that is not sustainable, right? You have to be building something that's going to be there for the long term, right? And the second area is in the area of civic education. This is crucial for us, not only here in the United States right now, but it is crucial across the world. And it's really interesting because people said, you must have had a foresight of some sort to think about creating a foundation that had a civic education component to it. But we believe a society that does not build its people, a society in which the people does not see that they are a central part of their community, will absolutely erode. So we have to build the sense of civic mindedness, the sense of being so engaged in your community in order for people to see that Haiti is a family. You know, the last thing you think is happening in the country is like civic education. Well, you know, just a couple weeks ago, we hosted a meeting and called, you know, many of the civic education organizations in the country to come to a meeting so we can talk about how do we work collectively around civic education in a country where there's kidnapping, in a country where people are shooting people, in a country where people don't feel like they can stay home, in a country where people are leaving at any given moment. What can we do collectively by putting our resources together to be able to have impact in this area of civic education in the country? 12 organizations showed up, right? And out of these are organizations that are throughout the country that are either doing civic education to sport, civic education with youth, civic education with music. Like, they are all over the place, you know, doing some work, but they don't really know each other in any meaningful way. So this was an opportunity to build that connection with one another. We are planning a summit in October, really focusing on all of these organizations coming together. Can you imagine one thing in mind, and that is love for country, love for human being, love for yourself, love for others? That's what civic education is about. And I am incredibly excited about what that could do in terms of building societies where we don't have to, you know, the idea for me that a Haitian could shoot another Haitian, that might make sense, no? How do we get back to the things we knew we had with sense of, and reinventing, because we're in a different age. We're in a different age, different society. So the way you and I had civic education when we were growing up is not the same anymore. So we have to reinvent that. We have to reimagine that right now. And to me, the fact that there's civic organizations that are in the country, we're not taking them outside and bringing them to the country, no? We're talking about organizations that are in the country that are coming together and said, we will make civic education a central part of what we do. I am so glad we go through, people submit their first little information about who they are and what is it that they're interested in doing. And then we review that and see whether or not should they be invited to submit a full proposal or not. And then we have a grant committee that's reviewing those proposals. And by the way, this is really, really cool, Kat. Really cool. Because you know how foundations in the US, like, you have to do characters, and it's really like, it's these paper things, you have to know how to do it, right, and so forth. But IT Community Trust, we are like really wanted to be innovative and wanted to make sure that everybody can have access to be able to submit a proposal. So now, if you want to submit a proposal to us, you can send a video, you can send a cassette tape, you can do the paper format if that's what you want to do, as long as you answering the questions that we ask you. Then, and that's important because it means like somebody doesn't have to get in a computer to do 150 characters, because that's a much more westernized way of doing foundation than for us to think about the indigenous way of doing it. So we have this grant committee, they review all of that. And then we send it all to the board. We have a board of governance, and the board ultimately make a decision of who's going to be funded for the year. Oh my goodness, what a great question to ask, you know. It is. It's such a really great question to ask, because one of the things that that I think that over the last 15 years of this, of really being a part of this foundation, is just it's unlearning the things that we've learned about who we are as people. You know, we have learned this idea that Haitians can come together. And man, we have a board of 23 Haitians and friends of Haitians that are coming together, that's working their buns off to build this foundation. That's not, that you cannot look at that and say that's that, that's true. So like we have we have like 33 volunteers who are part of the fundraising committee, the communication committee, and who are working so hard for the benefit of building this foundation for tomorrow. So I am just incredibly just humbled and honored to be surrounded by Haitians and fellow Haitians from Haiti, from the US, from Canada, throughout, who says we are willing to be a part of that. So I get fueled by all of that significantly. I'm incredibly humbled. I know it's a hard mountain, but I'm reminded that we are from a mountain country, and therefore we know how to climb mountains, and I'm willing and ready to climb those mountains as well. I've also learned the level of patience, parce que I have to tell you, I have this model, and all the young people know, c'est parler vite, parler chaud, parler vite, parler chaud. Really? Okay, but do you know that's IT's our name? I was like, no, you have to stop and really educate people. You really have to take the time. There's a level of unlearning that we all have to do about who we are as Haitians, as who we are as Black people. That that's been really, really humbling for me over the last couple of years. I am pumped. I am super excited what to come. Like when we said we're gonna be in Ocala, because we do a board meeting every year and in different parts of the country, and we said to all of our committees, we're gonna be in Ocala for our board meeting. All of them said, we're coming. If you guys are gonna be there, can you imagine 33 people saying, we in the midst of the most troubled time in the country? They didn't say, oh my God, there's kidnapping. They're like, we're coming. You're going, we're going. That really is, to me, is so meaningful in terms of what the future of IT is likely to be. The more we engage our young people, we're shaping this narrative that we have about IT. We want the images of on the Google stuff to go away. We want people to Google IT and see a very different images of who we are as a nation. So we are kicking off Haitian Nation. We are getting rid of that word diaspora, because we are one nationality. And we are saying to everybody, it is Haitian Nation. It just so happened that as a national, I live in Miami, I live in Canada, I live in China, but guess what my nationality is? So we are launching Haitian Nation as a central part of what we are doing to really showcase that who we are in, throughout not just in the country, outside of the country, but just really demonstrating this nation of Haitians that we have, and really showcasing the collective power that we have. Well, so thank you for asking about that, because it's so linked as well, right? So we say HAPSI, the Haitian American Professionals Coalition, HAPSI, and HAPSI is 20 years old this year. And it is a coalition of professional organizations coming together under one umbrella, focusing on developing a thriving Haitian community here in South Florida. So it is all of your Haitian Nurses Association, Haitian law, Haitian businesses, Haitian educators, right, and so forth and so on. We have Avancé. We have a slew. Right now, we have 16 organizations that are part of HAPSI. My goal as the chairwoman, I'm the new chairwoman this year for HAPSI, is to do 20 for 20. It's following. Okay, 20. The 20-year anniversary. We need 20 organizations to be a part of the organization, and it is about building collective power. Imagine what 20 Haitian professional organizations under one umbrella can do. What is the viewpoint of the Haitian community? And HAPSI speaks up. You speak on behalf of a really group of people. When HAPSI shows up, it means all of those organizations is showing up in terms of really thinking about what is happening in this community. How do we work together for the betterment of the community? And the stronger Haitian community we have in the United States, that is really about building our communities here, building wealth here, the stronger Haiti we will have. Well, I think that one of the things that I've learned over the years is that, you have to listen to yourself. You have to spend the time to get to know you, love you, develop you, and listen to that little part of you. I cannot tell you the number of people on my path who told me I was doing the wrong thing. I cannot tell you the voices that I heard of people saying that I wasn't gonna get, when I said I was gonna focus my research on Haitians, people said I wasn't gonna get tenured because nobody cared about Haitians and they weren't gonna read about Haitians, and so forth. And I remember, saying, well, I don't know who else. If it's not me, I don't know another Haitian as a professor in the academy. So if I'm not focusing on Haitians, who's going to focus on Haitians? If it's not me, then who? Who's going to do that work? And I do think a lot of that is about how do you quiet out the noises that's around you and get in tune to you, get in tune to that inner voice, because we know what we want. We know the directions we have to go. You know what your passion is. You know what's your interest. You know what's motivating you. But we get so bothered by what other people want of you that you find yourself going to law school, but you don't want to be a lawyer. You find yourself you don't want to do that, but it's just what you think the world wants of you, right? But if you get in tune to yourself and stay true to yourself and get to know you, right? And trust in you and trust in your vision, I guarantee you, my 50 more years, 50 plus years of experience have taught me that you can never go wrong with that. That if I had chosen to listen to other people, I don't know where I would have been right now. But listening to that inner voice in the faces of people saying, no, don't do that. No, don't go into the field of psychology because nobody cares about psychology. No, don't do this. But if you stay true to yourself, the rest of the world will just fall into place. They will just fall into place. Thank you so much to the young people in my life, because I was never a social media person, never on a website, honestly. And the young people in my classroom said, you cannot just come here and pour onto us this information and not put it out. And so they are the reasons why I have a Facebook page, I have an Instagram page. They are the one who got me in Clubhouse. Like, I swear to God, they said, I had never heard of Clubhouse before. They're like, Dr. G, you got to go in Clubhouse. I was like, oh my God, not another thing. But but I said to everybody, I hang out with the young people because they really where the people my age, I don't know where we're going. I don't pay attention to them, but I'm gonna pay a whole lot of attention to the young people. So when they tell me to show up someplace, I show up. I was like, okay, you want me to show up in Clubhouse? Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. And I show up in Clubhouse, right? So I'm there, there now as well. So people can always, and they remind me that I need to check my messages and all of that on Instagram and Messenger as well. So I'm on all of the social media stuff. HAPSI has a website. IT Community Trust has a website. I hope that Way Back T, which is the organization that's focusing on mental health that I'm a part of, also has a website, and people can sign up for the mailing list, because then you'll get a chance to get our regular newsletter also for each of those organizations, so that when you see when the different activities are happening, and then of course on email, people can always reach me, ngerda@miami. It's hard for you not to find me online.